exciting one for us. We're finally getting around to dealing with all the retail stores in town. I announced that in church and everybody started giggling. I said retail stores. I said general stores. Otisfield, like every other town in Maine, has always had general stores. Ours were located all over the place, and we're going to concentrate on three big ones tonight with different speakers. The first of these is going to be Maureen Howard sitting over there. She's going to talk about the general stores in Spurs Corner, of which there have been several. Then we're going to follow with Callie Zielinski. You've already heard a lot from Callie, but she has a good voice, I think. Callie is going to talk about the East Otisfield General Store, which her grandfather, great-grandfather ran. And then I and John Sileman are going to talk about the Bolster's Mill Store, which is still going. And each of these talks is limited to 1/2 hour. So I ask if you will save your questions to the end of that particular person's talk, so they don't get too much interrupted. We're going to have pictures, compliments of David Heyer as usual. And let's see, what else do I need to say? I'm going to start off very quickly by talking about some of the lesser-known stores in Otisfield. And these two are, David, you've got to click it to the first one. Thank you. The very first store in town was probably on Bell Hill. It probably looked like that. That was not the first store built there. The first store in Hancock, on Bell Hill was probably around 1805. Wow. And you're saying, why Bell Hill? Well, that was the center of the town for the first settlers, and that's where people had to go. That was located very close to the meeting house. It was that particular store was built in 1821. The first one was built, we don't know when the first was built. I don't know when that disappeared either. Does anyone here know anything more about that store? All I've got is what's in Spurs history. Okay, that's one kind of obscure store. And can you click it again, David? And the other one I want to mention is the one in Hancockville. This was in the newspaper, too. Hancockville is not a commonly known village in Otisfield. It's basically where Buddy Hamilton lives in his large log cabin. That's right. That's more or less the center of Hancockville, would you say?
I thought it went more towards Spurs Corner also.
Okay, it went toward Spurs Corner. Okay, so the nutting house is the big nutting house in Hancockville?
Right across the road from my house.
Yeah, that one, but the one down, the other nutting house?
What about that one?
Is that in Hancockville? Well, we don't know where
It used to be all part of the same land.
Yeah, it's the same
all
land.
owned by the
Yeah, we
same
don't know
family.
where it is, except that what I do know from reading Spurs history is that the first store in Hancockville was built around 1800 again by Joseph Hancock, and he died in 1815, so you know it had to be early. Probably wasn't that built.
It was.
It was that building? Okay. You weren't there then.
Oh, well, I have ancestors.
Okay, and there was, this is not a fly-by-night operation, clearly. This went on for some time. I don't know if that's E.L. Hancock. The last owner was E.L. Hancock. And I don't know when that ended. Do you know when it ended, Nancy?
No, but it went to, it was Scribner's.
That is
And
E.L.?
my granddad owned it.
Okay. But the car dates it pretty well.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful picture.
And where was it located? Spurs Corner or at your place?
About where your sign is.
Okay,
It was the big white barn that was attached to the Scribner.
okay.
And they dragged it down to my dad's and used it for a barn.
Okay, well that's all I have to say about these obscure stores. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Maureen Howard, who has spent a lot of time putting together information on the Spurs Corner store, and she lives there, which helps.
And we do know where Spurs Corner is.
Yes. Okay. Good evening. One of the things that Jean has asked me to start off with is, what were the general stores like all over town? And we're getting our information about that from some sixth graders that in 2002 in the Otisfield School put together a written history, actually of the Bolster's Mill store, but we feel that this paragraph really reflects exactly what the general stores. Am I speaking loud enough?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And this is what they wrote. At one point in Otisfield, there were 6 neighborhood stores because people couldn't travel so far to get to a store. The early stores carried flour, sugar, potatoes, kerosene, yeast, canned goods, molasses, heavy coats in the fall, dried beans, rubber boots, thread, and fabrics. No stores carried any bread until the 1940s. The only seafood sold was oysters in the fall, and they came from Portland. If you needed something that wasn't in the storekeeper would try and order it for you. If you went into the store, you would go up to the counter, and the shopkeeper would wait on you. So that was, I actually looked at the names of those young men and women in 6th grade, and they are now very grown up. So it's been fun to watch them grow up. I actually put this, this is my drawing of a map that I found quite a few years ago in Cumberland County, down in Portland, because I live at Spurs Corner, and I was trying to figure out when my house was built. I'm just going to try and give you, and I have this because it's really helped me as I look through these to kind of get myself oriented. And please know that my dimensions are not perfect at all. But there's Spurs Corner, and that's East Otisfield. That would be Oak Hill. That would go to Boaster's Mills, and that would go to Casco. I'm actually going to start about 30 years before this. This is 1871. And again, most of you, I'm sure, know about the history of Otisfield by Samuel Spur. And a lot of this information comes from him. It's a lot of dates, and I'm not going to just go through the dates. I am going to go through a few of them. And the earliest record of a store at Spurs Corner, and by the way, it was there, was in 1838. And that was owned by Oliver Cooley. Now, I also, from the history of Otisfield, there's a couple of chapters. One is some diaries, and one is on the stores themselves. So the next few quotes come from this history. And they're quotes from Dr. Horace Barrows. And he writes, in June 5th, 1839, took an early start this morning for the Spurs Corner and hauled up our sugar, which was stored in Uncle Cooley's store. Found the old gentleman living entirely alone, his wife in Mass, his daughter gone from him, and he keeping bachelor hall. And about 3 years later, Joseph Hancock started trading the store, and he partnered with Lyman Kimball. And in March 1884, again from Dr. Barrows, I arose this morning at 4 about daylight and set off for Spurs Corner, where I had quite an interview with a new trader, Mr. Joseph Hancock, in Uncle Cooley's store. And about a year later, he talks about, went down to Hancock and Lyman Kimball's this morning, and very soon closed the bargain with them for their goods. Then took in a sleigh, which kind of gives you an idea of how they got back and forth, load of coffee, rice, and nails, and I set off for home. Now, in 1849, Hancock and Kimball, which we were just talking about, they sold the store to a Louis Sawyer. And one of the things that was kind of couple of things that were fascinating for me going through this and trying to figure out who owned the store at what time, is that
they would get sold like half the store and a third of the store, and I just found that kind of fascinating. The other thing that I found fascinating is so-and-so would sell a third of their store and go off to Ohio or go off to Kentucky, and you can't help but wonder how they did that. You know, how did they get all the way to Kentucky and Ohio back then? So we're up to 1849, excuse me. They sell the store to Louis Sawyer. He sells half of the store, and I'm mentioning this because of that fact. Half the store to his brother, Josiah Sawyer. And then Spur says of them, he and his brother, Josiah, ran a store at Spur's Quarter, and he then bought out his brother. And he was town clerk most of the time, from 1851 to 1862, which was probably when he ran the store. So that was probably not unusual for the town clerk. We can all remember Barbara certainly being the town clerk out of her home. I remember my mother grew up in a little town called Arlington, Vermont, and her uncle was the town clerk, and we'd go over to visit, and he did that out of his home. So I'm sure that was the norm. I'm going to mention the next person, 1852, Abel Thurston. And the reason I mention him, he bought the store in 1852, but he also built, this is our house, and he built our house, so that name certainly caught my eye. He bought half the store, and then he later bought the other half of the store. Thurston sells the store to a Johnson W. Knight, and I found out that Mr. Knight lived right there, which was the Klingler's house, which has been moved in our time. And he sold it for $300. Johnson Lovewell buys the Johnson Knight's share of the store. And at the same time, Silas D. Andrews, who lived in what was called the parsonage, I've heard it referred to as the parsonage, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room have heard that. And he bought a third of the store. So the store is now called, and here's the store, but again, remember, I'm not quite that far up yet, but I'm up to 1866, so we're getting there. The store was, at that time in 1866, called the Lovewell and Andrews store. But then Russell Scribner buys out Johnson Lovewell's share, and the store, and this is now where we're at in 1871. The store is now called Scribner and Andrews. One of the things that I think surprised Jean and I, somehow we had the store over here a little bit more facing this road, but it apparently was facing the road to East Otisfield. So it is now 1873, it is now Russell Scribner's store, but one of the things that happened was a Charles Hancock got the post office away from him, and Scribner had to give up the store. And I think I read that it just wasn't profitable without having the post office. So he gave up the store, and he actually went to Kentucky. I'm going to skip forward a few years, and to 1904. And a Frank Barrows, who was apparently the nephew of Dr. Barrows that we've spoken about, he buys the store. And again, it's still here. And it was apparently still on that corner. At this time, he sold this lot right here, which is hard for us to kind of picture, because right now, if you think of Spur's Corner, there's the little monument, the Spurs Monument, there's all those trees there. And I've gone to look at it because it just, in my head, it wasn't very big. But there's really quite a bit of room there. And he sold that piece of land for $1 to a grange. And there was a grange there. And that was the grange. And that was moved. And one of the things, I was talking to Lenny Adler and Richard Mead, Sr., and he said, they both said one of the things, and I'm sure many people in this room know this, people just moved houses and granges, and they just moved them all around. But that's one picture of the grange. And that's another picture of the grange right there. So I was kind of hoping that the Klingler's were here that house is no longer there, but that was moved in my time. I watched it go by my house. That was the Gary Klingler house, which was it's a very old house. They've now moved it a little bit down the road to Abbey Road. But one of the things you can't help but notice, I mean, that's the road to Casco. That's the road to East Otisfield. And that must be Oak Hill, and this must be to Boaster's Mills. It's like,
And that's a
what a
cat.
difference.
Yeah. Best thing's a cat.
Quite a difference. Now, the next thing that happened is that the store burned. So if you could go back in your head where that store was, the store burned down. And so he built another store. Actually, I'll go forward a little bit.
Go back.
Well, I can't. Did you want to see that map? Or you all right? You okay? So before, the store was over here. And we feel that there's nothing in the history that really says this, but from reading deeds and things like that, we feel at this point, after the store burned from over here, that the store was built over here. And I remember, and there's going to be people in this room that very much remember that story. That store, I'm sorry. In 1919, that was bought by Mr. Florence McAuliffe, and in a few minutes we have some McAuliffe descendants here, so that's very exciting. They'll be able to talk to us about their memories or what they've heard about the store. So Mr. McAuliffe bought it from Frank Barrels, and he trades a number of years. And as you can see, the store has been moved over to the southwest corner of Spurs Corner. And that's the McAuliffe family. So that's Florence and his wife, I think Stella. Am I right?
She's not in the picture.
Oh, she's not in this picture.
No,
Okay.
no.
So
Those
it's
are
not
his
labeled,
children.
right?
Those are his children.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's
Thank you.
Cornelius and Anna McAuliffe and Wynne McAuliffe and Jeannie McAuliffe,
Right.
the little girl.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks. And then Stella McAuliffe, we just found is not in this picture, sells the store to Elise Stratton. There's not much information, there's actually no information about Lee Stratton, and didn't seem to have it for very long. But Lee Stratton sold it to Herbert and Hattie Weber. And here's the Weber store. And this is actually the store that I remember, the building that I remember being there, which I'm sure many people in this room remember being there. So that was 1949. And I think they had it through most of through late 1950s. And in 1957, Philip Hunt and Marilyn Hunt of Norway buy the store from the Webers. And that's a picture. And we also have some relatives of the Hunts here, so that's pretty exciting. And then in 1996, which was 20 years, I guess, after I was here, that building burned down. So it's no longer there. You can see Chris Kelly's house, which of course is still there. So it burnt down in 1996. And Chris Kelly now owns the house, of course, in this lot. So I would love to have anyone that would like to either talk about the McAuliffes or the Hunts Market or anything, or anybody in the room
And the post office,
to add.
was in Hunts as well?
I don't know the answer to that.
My husband seems to think so,
Okay,
but
I don't know the answer
it's
to
been a
that.
long time.
Anybody know the answer to that, whether there was?
The rural delivery, when did
Right,
the
in the
rural
Hunts.
delivery from Oxford start?
Wow.
I know there was a post office there during the McAuliffe.
Okay, okay. So I bet it's true. It would make sense. Yes.
I used to go in there with my father quite a lot. And I don't recall when Weber's was there, of there being a post office in
don't.
there. I don't recall. I'm not saying there wasn't, but I
Yeah.
don't recall it.
I think it was in Putney.
Because we
There was
came
one.
here in 47 and there was rural delivery then.
Okay.
Weber's were in there after that.
We talked to, I mentioned Edward Cousins, who was born in Otisfield in 34, and Stella was the postmistress. And at one point, there was a change and the post office was moved to the Bolster's Mill store from Otisfield.
I think it was about that period of time when they started bringing the mail, delivering the mail through here from Ox.
From Oxford. Yeah.
I think so.
I mean, would there have been, like, lots and lots of years ago, would there have been like more than one post office in a town like, I'm just general stores all over? Would there have been more than one post, or would one place have a post office? Do you have any idea?
Boasters Mills used to have Ernest Gay as a store, and then he went out of business and then moved across the river
Yeah.
to what I remember as the tobacco store. There was 3 stores in town, as I remember. The store that presently is open was not open at that time frame that I'm referring to. Let somebody else have this. I have my turn coming up, so let me do it.
Okay, we appreciate it. Okay.
If anyone has any pictures, I forgot to mention
Yeah,
this.
actually, I just saw a really lovely picture of the McAuliffe store.
I would love to be able to copy some of these at the end of the meeting, so not now, but. Okay, I think Callie is up next with, unless you have any more questions other than that.
Any other memories of the Hunt store?
I'm the oldest and I
Scenes?
don't remember a post office at all, but I
Okay.
do remember going there and helping my dad.
Yeah. And your dad was?
Philip.
I was too little.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm 20 years younger than him.
Oh, shut up.